PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian McKelly. And on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we are going to be doing for the final time of the 2024 season, we are going to be doing our Vegas Golden Knights Prospect Watch. Now, for the people who are not aware of what this series is, for the past two seasons, at the beginning of every single month, we do a prospect watch on your Vegas Golden Knights. So we pick a few players from the Henderson Silver Knights and a few players from the Savannah Ghost Pirates, the AHL and ECHL respectively. And we kind of break down and kind of show you what has been going on with those players out there in Vegas as a prospect watch. So we started this back in October. So this is going to be the seventh and final prospect watch of the 2023-2024 season for your Vegas Golden Knights. And what a journey it has been over the past seven segments that we have done about the prospect watch for your Vegas Golden Knights. Now, we do have to acknowledge that because the season is coming to an end soon, the Henderson Silver Knights are going to be wrapping up in a few weeks. Savannah Ghost Pirates, they're going to be wrapping up in a few weeks as well. I do have to issue a disclaimer. The disclaimer is because of the playoffs and because of the NHL situation, we are not going to do an end of the year prospect watch like we did last season. In the 2022-23 season, we had an 8th episode of the prospect watch, but we did it in between round 1 and round 2 of the playoffs with your Vegas Golden Knights. I just wanted to give you a disclaimer before we start this episode that this will not be happening for this year. This is going to be the 7th and final part of the prospect watch for the 2023-2024 season. So I appreciate everyone who is watching and everyone who has been a part of the prospect watch that we have done this season when we're talking about the Henderson Silver Knights and the Vegas Golden Knights prospects and everything that's going on there, Savannah and Henderson. And for clarification, and we have had to do this before and we will do it again, for clarification, you are no longer considered a prospect after you have met one of two criteria. And this is according to the NHL rulebook, okay? We're using the official rulebook to do our prospect watch. You are no longer considered a prospect after you A, play 50 games in the NHL, or B, reach the age of 26. So, for the people who are born before 1998, you are no longer a prospect. And if you have played 50 games or more in the NHL, you are no longer a prospect. That's why guys like Kaden Korczak have graduated. Pavel Dorofeyev, he has graduated. There are some players who started out on the prospect list and our prospect breakdown that we did back in September before the season started that have graduated and moved on to the NHL. So I just want to point that out. Congratulations to Pavel Dorofeyev. Congratulations to Kaden Korczak, because those are actually the main two that were in the top 10 when we did our ranking list back in September. I will leave a link right up here if you're on our YouTube channel. You go back and watch that. We did our prospect doing the top 10 prospects to begin the year. So congratulations to Pavel Dorofeyev and Kaden Korczak for graduating from being a prospect and being a full-time NHLer in Vegas. And then being the age 26, there actually are a few players right now who are kind of getting close to that list. In fact, there is actually 2 or 3 players I do want to mention right now because they are getting very close to no longer being a prospect for your Vegas Golden Knights. The first one was Jonas Roundbeer. 1999 is when he was born. Now, because he has been a bottom 6 forward for Vegas for a certain amount of time, there is a good chance that he will eventually surpass the 50 game mark. So there's not even a chance of him being a prospect. But according to the rules and according to what has been set up when it comes to that situation, when you look at the Vegas Golden Knights and when you really study what they have done, Jonas Roundbeer, 25 years old, so he will eventually get to that point. But yeah, he will be no longer a prospect after next year for your Vegas Golden Knights. And then the second one that's going to be very important for the Vegas Golden Knights, like I mentioned, Jonas Roundbeer, him 1999, him going to be getting up to about 26 years old. The second guy who has still been considered a prospect, in fact, we did a player profile on him here on Vegas Hockey Hub before, and that is Jiri Patera. So Jiri Patera, he will also be getting to 26. He is from the year 1999. So really interesting how that breaks down. The fact that considering your age and considering the group that you are currently in, 1998 and before, that means you're no longer a prospect. Pretty much everyone from 1998 heading into next season is going to no longer be considered a prospect. And then after that season, 1999 will be the cutoff. So, yeah, for clarification, we always have to mention this when we do the prospects because there's some confusion about what we mean by prospect because there's some older guys who are doing great in the AHL. That's not who we're talking about. There are some guys in the late 20s who are doing solid in the ECHL. That's not who we're talking about. We're just breaking it down. We're talking about the prospects of the Vegas Golden Knights. We're talking about the guys who have either not played 50 games in the NHL and or are 20 or 25 years and younger for the Vegas Golden Knights. And getting into the first one, and this guy, very impactful. In fact, he has been arguably the best player on the Henderson Silver Knights this season, the MVP, if you really want to go there, for the Henderson Silver Knights in the AHL. This guy leads the team when it comes to assists and in points. He has just done an incredible job this year. And, of course, I'm talking about their all-star from the beginning of this year, and that is Gregory Dyanchenko. And he has been an amazing case study. And if anyone has actually been down to Henderson, as anyone who's been down to the arena there in Henderson and have checked out what is those Henderson Silver Knight games, he has been exceptional. He has been an incredible player to watch. Now, he was a waiver claim from the beginning of the year. He came from the Florida Panthers, a former first-round pick by Florida back in 2018. But what I like about Gregory Dyanchenko is what he has accomplished this season for Henderson, what he has done as a member of the Henderson Silver Knights, and the fact that he is only about 24 years old for your Vegas Golden Knights and what he has accomplished this season. So for Gregory Dyanchenko, he has had 18 goals, 51 points, and a whopping 48 penalty minutes on the year for the Henderson Silver Knights. He's also the same player who has 6 power play goals, 7 power play assists, and the most important statistic, Gregory Dyanchenko has 5 game-winning goals. He has 2 goals in overtime to help the Vegas Golden Knights affiliate, Henderson Silver Knights, pick up the win. So for this guy in Gregory Dyanchenko, he has been fantastic. He has been amazing for the Henderson Silver Knights. But what has he done in between the last video we did back in the beginning of March till now? Well, what Dyanchenko has accomplished for your Henderson Silver Knights, he had a 2-point performance against the Abbotsford Canucks on March 8th. And then he had a 2-point performance in back-to-back games against the Abbotsford Canucks on the 16th and 17th of March before getting goals against the Milwaukee Admirals on March 23rd and Bakersfield Condors on March 29th. It's also the same Dyanchenko who has had 6 games in March with at least 1 penalty in it. And for someone who has been doing what he has done for the Henderson Silver Knights. This is a guy who has had 9 points in the last 10 games for Henderson. So over the last 10 games, he has been averaging a little under a point per game in Henderson. And the fact that they have played 60 games this year, DeAnsenko, 51 points. He leads the entire Henderson Silver Knights in that category. He has been the star-studded talent that he has been with the Henderson Silver Knights. He did a really stand-up job this year. And considering what he did last year, he actually has gotten better in every statistical category from what he did the year before. Last year, he was with the Florida Panthers affiliate. He only had 12 goals on the year. He's had 18 this season for Henderson. He had only 36 points. He has gotten a lot more than that with 51. And even his penalty minutes went up from 39 to 48. Overall, for Gregory DeAnsenko, he has become a solid number one. He has become a player who has done a fantastic job this season for your Henderson Silver Knights. And the reason why he was an all-star, the reason why he's played a couple of games for your Vegas Golden Knights this season, and is someone who maybe next year can kind of build off of that momentum he had this year and maybe earn a roster spot for your Vegas Golden Knights, because he did a stellar job in Henderson this past season. And one last part that I do have to mention with Gregory DeAnsenko, this is a guy who also did suit up for the Vegas Golden Knights this past season, and he has actually played a few games this year. In fact, his stat line for the Vegas Golden Knights in his limited action so far in 6 games had 2 penalty minutes and a -3. So for a guy like Gregory DeAnsenko, this is somebody who has played about half a dozen games for Vegas this past season. Now, for him, his last shot being in the NHL and the last game that he has played was actually against the Columbus Blue Jackets. He actually got called up to Vegas on a 2-game stint back in the beginning of March. So for Gregory DeAnsenko, this is somebody who has had a little bit of opportunity in Vegas. He had a cup of coffee in January. He had about a 2-game stint there. Then injuries happened in February. He had an extra 2 games there. And then in March, he had 2 games as well. So for anyone who's done that math, anyone who does a certain trend here, do not be surprised if by April, he gets an additional 2-game tryout and an additional 2 games worth of coffee that he will have in Vegas with all the injuries and everything going on, considering the last few games of the year. Will DeAnsenko be added to the playoff roster for Vegas? It's going to be a question mark. It's definitely going to be plausible for him to be part of it, because when the Vegas Golden Knights expand their roster and are able to add 6 extra players onto their playoff roster, I would not be surprised if he did get taken there. But considering the amount of talent that Henderson has and considering the amount of players Henderson has at their disposal, it will be a 50-50 shot for him. But overall, solid season by Gregory DeAnsenko. 51 points this year. Just an incredible job by him. And as we're doing our prospect watch for the final time of the 2023-2024 season on Vegas Hockey Hub, I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. And this next player, we have talked about a good amount. We have been discussing this guy because he has actually made a big stride this season. And we're talking about Brendan Brisson. Brendan Brisson this season for the Henderson Silver Knights, he has done a stellar job. But more importantly, his progression, his improvement is noted. The Brendan Brisson from 2021, 2022, 2023 is very different than what we have seen this season in Henderson. As Brendan Brisson, over the last 10 games in Henderson, he has done a stellar job, as Brendan Brisson this season has played 50 games for the Henderson Silver Knights. He has 17 goals, 36 points and 40 penalty minutes. He has 4 power play goals, 2 power play assists, and 2 game-winning goals for Henderson this past season. Over the last 10 games, Brennan Brisson, ever since he has come back to the Henderson Silver Knights after being in Vegas for a certain amount of time, he had a 2-point performance against the Abbotsford Canucks on March 8th, a goal and an assist. He also had a 4 penalty minute night against the Coachella Valley Firebirds. And more importantly, for Brennan Brisson, he had one of his best performances throughout the entire year against the Abbotsford Canucks on March 17th, as he had 2 goals and 1 assist with a +2 on the night. So Brennan Brisson has had 5 goals since coming back to the Silver Knights and playing for them. It's also the same Brennan Brisson who this season has done pretty stellar. And the only reason why I can say that is you compare his stats from last year and you compare his stats from this year, and he's actually done some very stellar things. This is the same Brennan Brisson who over this past year, he has 2 more points on the power play than he did the year before. It's also the same Brennan Brisson who has a better plus-minus than the year before. He had a -2 back in 2022, 2023. Now he is actually at 0. It's also Brennan Brisson. He has the same amount of assists, and his points and goals are around the same. But what he has improved on is his technique. What he's improved on is what he is doing on the ice, what he's doing in the forecheck, what he's doing in the offensive zone, how he's creating opportunities for his teammates. Brennan Brisson has elevated his game from last year to this year, and it's actually the main reason why Brennan Brisson has been getting called up to Vegas multiple times this year. That's why the former first-round pick had his NHL debut this season for Vegas. And really, when you stop and analyze Brennan Brisson, I mean, considering this, he had an assist in his return to Vegas against the Arizona Coyotes in the beginning of April. It's also the same Brennan Brisson, and this is actually spread out among a couple of days, but let's set the tone. Did you know that Brennan Brisson is on a 4-game point streak for the Vegas Golden Knights? That's right. From when he was playing in Vegas back in February to now coming back in April, Brennan Brisson has scored a point in 4 straight games for Vegas. So Brennan Brisson, I have to give him a lot of respect and a good amount of credit for what he has done for the Vegas Golden Knights on that end, and then what he has accomplished in Henderson in the AHL. Will Brennan Brisson graduate to the main roster? Will he eventually be promoted and no longer be called a prospect and no longer be on the prospect watch list? Well, Brennan Brisson, at this point in time, you have to ask yourself the main 2 questions, the main 2 considerations, the clarification I did earlier in the show. Brennan Brisson has only played a dozen games in the NHL. That's not 50. And he is 22 years old. That's not 26. So heading into next year, he will still be classified as a prospect for your Vegas Golden Knights. Now, depending on what he does in Vegas next year, depending on how well he progresses and continues to get better in Vegas, he might be off that list by the end of next year, like Pavel Dorofeyev is no longer on that list, and certain players like Kane Korczak no longer on that list. But at this moment in time, Brennan Brisson, still a prospect, but he has played a dozen games in the NHL, and like I said, has a 4-game point streak in Vegas, and he has actually had his most recent outing in the AHL, a 2-goal performance there. So Brennan Brisson, very successful there. I like what I've seen from him. He's done a lot of good for the Henderson Silver Knights. I like what I've seen from him. And the third and final player from the Henderson Silver Knights that we are going to be discussing here on Vegas Hockey Hub is the goaltending department, and that is Isaiah Saville. Now, for Isaiah Saville, this is a guy who we also did a player profile on this show earlier this year. But what I like about Isaiah Saville, and what I can appreciate about Isaiah Saville, is how much better and how well he has been performing this past season. A lot of people don't want to acknowledge and don't want to accept the fact that Isaiah Saville has really kind of developed into his own. He's kind of taken off in terms of how he has performed for Henderson. Just to give you a little bit of comparison with Isaiah Saville, this is a guy 24 years old for the Henderson Silver Knights, but this is his second season playing with the Henderson Silver Knights. Very good situation there. And when it comes to Isaiah Saville, his statistics this season in Henderson has actually been a certain amount of good in Henderson for Isaiah Saville, as in 21 games, he has had a goals against average of 3.09. He has a save percentage of 89.8. And when it comes to Isaiah Saville, he had his first ever shutout in the AHL that happened in this season. So for Isaiah Saville, a guy who has been, kind of been progressing and taking it, one step at a time, this is somebody who has played, only about a dozen games last year in Henderson. He only had a cup of coffee in 2021, 2022. He didn't play that many games in that year. But for Isaiah Saville, this is someone who has gotten more confident. You could tell that he has kind of been building himself up and getting better as a goaltender in Henderson. And since he is only 24 years old, Jiri Patera, he's about to graduate. Like I said, he is a year older than Isaiah Saville is. So when Patera eventually does graduate, Saville will be right behind him in the pecking order because he was drafted, he was drafted in 2019, and Jiri Patera was drafted in 2017. So there's a 2-year gap in the draft, but only a 1-year gap in the age for Saville and Patera. And I have to keep this in mind that when it comes to Isaiah Saville, this is the same goaltender who has been the backup for a certain portion of the year in Vegas. When all the injuries were going on and all of the mishaps were happening, Aiden Hill was out. Logan Thompson had the Vegas flu. Patera got injured during the Colorado game. Isaiah Saville stepped up and was actually in the practice sessions at City National Arena. He was wearing the Golden Knights uniform. He was sitting on the bench. He was an impactful member of the Golden Knights roster, sitting on the bench, just biding his time, trying to get an opportunity in the NHL. And no doubt in my mind that either this upcoming year or the year after, the 24-year-old Isaiah Saville will eventually get his first NHL start. It's going to happen eventually. Now, it could be due to injuries, like what happened with Patera back in 2022. He had to come in due to injury and play for Vegas. Or it could be a situation like with Logan Thompson and with Aiden Hill, where the right dominoes just had to fall for that certain team for them to plug in and get a start in the NHL. But he is going to be good enough, and I think that he is actually talented enough in net to eventually become a solid member of the Vegas Golden Knights or the NHL moving forward. And the one player from the Henderson Silver Knights that we are going to be talking about, because this guy is actually split time between Henderson and Savannah, and that's staying with the goaltender department and talking about Jesper Beckman. So Jesper Beckman, the young goaltender from Sweden, he has actually been spending the past 2 seasons kind of going back and forth between Henderson and Vegas. So for Jesper Beckman, this is a guy who is, once again, 23 years old. And when you have a guy like him, he comes from Sweden. He was drafted in 2020 during that draft class. But what I like about him is that he has played about 16 games this year for the Henderson Silver Knights, when they were calling up Batara and calling up Seville, you actually had to have Jesper Beckman come in and play a decent amount of games. Him and Jordan Papirny were your two goalies in Henderson for a while. And Jesper Beckman has been some growing pains for sure. He has a goals against average of 3.3, but he has 6 wins, 5 losses, and 2 overtime losses for a save percentage of 89.8. And then when you move over to the Savannah Ghost Pirate side of it, and you actually break down the stats in Savannah on the ECHL end of it, it actually tells you a much different story for Jesper Beckman. So far in 15 games in the ECHL, he had 7 wins, 8 losses, a save percentage of 89.9, but a goals against average of just 3. So his stats did a little bit better in Savannah than they did in Henderson. But overall, when it comes to Jesper Beckman, with him having his age and the fact that he is younger, or about 2 years younger than Isaiah Seville and 3 years younger than Yuri Batara, and the fact that he came from a draft class a year later than Isaiah Seville, all it tells me is that when it comes to Jesper Beckman, he will get more opportunities. He's going to get a little bit more time to kind of settle and become a goalie that Vegas wants. So on the goaltender side, Jesper Beckman and Isaiah Seville. And then on the forward side, we had Gregory Dioncenko and Brendan Bryson for the prospect watch. And I just want to say once again, since this is the final prospect watch of the 2023-2024 season, these guys, they did not get mentioned, but these are my honorable mentions for this season. Joe Fleming out there in the Savannah Ghost Pirates, he was born in 2003, so he does count here. He has 21 points and a whopping 112 penalty minutes in the ECHL. Joe Fleming is a kind of gritty guy, someone who you can count on when it matters to kind of rough up somebody. He's a bruiser. He's someone who can step up for his teammates, and I like that about Joe Fleming. Anybody who was there during the development camp for the Vegas Golden Knights, he was scrappy. He got into a fight in one of the games that happened there. Joe Fleming, to watch out for him. After all, he is only 21 years old for the Vegas Golden Knights. And then on the forward side, Simeon Pinard. This guy, an undrafted free agent. I talked about him on a prospect watch before. But for an undrafted free agent to have 45 points in his first season playing professional hockey, he has actually spent a little bit of time in Henderson alongside his time in Savannah. So for Simeon Pinard, this is a guy who's played 11 games in Henderson and then played 56 games in the ECHL, but racked up 45 points on the year. So I wanted to give an honorable shout out and a mention to him. And then the last person I'm going to talk about is Kelty Jari Leon. And this is a guy playing in Savannah. He is a 24-year-old in the ECHL. And so far this season playing in Savannah, he has had 6 goals, 21 points for 32 games in the ECHL. Now, this is someone who's in his first season playing for the Savannah Ghost Pirates, and it's actually interesting to see how he has performed considering what he has done in Savannah in limited action. One last guy, because there's honorable mentions here, our last honorable mention. And he is an honorable mention because this guy, he did some good in Vegas, and he actually made his NHL debut a while ago. But the reason why I had to go with Bryson and I'd go with Dioncenko over him is because of him being the number 1 prospect. There's going to be more eyeballs on him in the future, especially heading into next year. And I'm talking about the 22-year-old top prospect, Lucas Cormier. And Lucas Cormier, who was drafted in 2020, 58 games this year, 4 goals and 21 points in Henderson for your top prospect, Lucas Cormier. So once again, this was Vegas Hockey Hub Recap. this Vegas Hockey Hub. We also do Vegas Hockey Hub recap as well. And this was our prospect watch. Until next time, I'm your host, Ian McKelly. Continue watching hockey. Go support junior hockey. And go, Knights, go.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.